The information contained in this presentation is provided as a reference only. Charter schools and chartering authorities are encouraged to review the laws and regulations and consult with their own legal counsel regarding the application to their specific situations. Next slide, please. So today we're going to have, here's our introduction. Please remember Zoom etiquette. Keep yourself muted. You can put questions in the chat. There will be a Q&A and breakout rooms near the end. We are being recorded. However, the recording is only happening in the main room. Breakout rooms are not recorded. So today we are going to be talking about our parking lot, our previous charter chat questions. We're going to do some a little bit of current updates from the legislature, hot topics. We have a special presentation from CCAP, and we'll do the breakout rooms and we'll have Q&A. Next slide, please. So I'm Dr. Michelle Johnson. I am the Associate Director for the Charter Schools Department here at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And you can see the rest of our team. And we also are joined by our partner, next slide please, at CCAP, the California Charter Authorizing Professionals. We have Tom and Dave here, and we're grateful for them. Next slide, please. We're going to be talking about, here's our parking lot. We do receive lots of different questions on a variety of topics, but we don't always have answers for them. We are collaborating with the appropriate divisions at the CDE to try and get guidance where it is being developed. And we wanted to make sure that that you know that we're hearing you. We know that the questions are not being ignored. That's why we have our parking lot. So keep the questions coming and we will get answers as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn this over to Dave.
Thank you, Michelle. So we actually have some answers to some questions that were asked before. And so let me review them pretty quickly. Will there be a separate webinar on charter school performance categories? The good news is there has been. CDE's AMARD's division did a session on charter school performance categories, and they did this on March 26th, and it was recorded. A link is provided on our resource page for you, so you can actually review it. It's a high quality piece. I highly recommend it. Second question was, where can authorizers find information related to charter school terms? The department has recently just updated their data files and directory information webpage, and it includes a compilation of data files and a directory information regarding charter schools, and that you can actually find the charter terms in that information. The third one, what are the submission deadlines for the California State Board of Education for 24-25? And again, on our the resource page and the department's appeals to the State Board of Education webpage has been updated to conclude the submission dates for the 24-25 fiscal year. And then finally, what are the items that authorizers should review on a charter school website? Well, we have a listing of them that's available, but let me quickly review some of the key ones. This is something that's not limited to, but these are the things that you should be looking for. The SARC, the School Accountability Report Card, the LCAP, board agendas, easy access, one-page click, board minutes, most recently approved, English Language Advisory Committee, if applicable, agendas and minutes, Title IX policy and procedures, charter school complaint form, the CDE form with authorizer contact info, a cyber bullying policy, the safety plan, the independent study policy, student/family handbook, the suicide policy, school admissions, preferences, application, lottery procedures, school contact information, accessibility, website in multiple language, documents in multiple languages. Those are some of the items you should be looking for, but it's not, you might also have some additional ones that you're looking for on a regular basis, and many charter schools include that and some additional items. Okay. I am back to Hot topics, fiscal oversight. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
All right, so breakout rooms. We are going to have, in the past, we've had north, central, and south. But because we're getting to be such a large group, we're now just going to break out in random authorizers in room A, B, and C. So please make sure that you rename yourself on your and have your name and your organization. All the non-authorizer partners will be still in the non-authorizer partner room, but please make sure that you rename yourself so that we know which organization you're with. Next slide, please. So we're going to be talking quickly about the legislative update. Things are moving through, not much is happening. I will say that, next slide, I know that SB 1380 made it out of the Education Committee and is on its way to appropriations, but everything else is just still in process, and we'll keep you updated as we're going. Next slide. So next slide. All right, so the state board and the ACCS, the ACCS meeting was held on April 9th. There were some non-classroom based funding determinations were considered. Their next meeting will be June 4th. And the state board's meeting will be held on May 8th and 9th, and they will be addressing non-classroom based funding determinations from ACCS. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move into the hot topics. I'm going to now turn it over to Matt to talk about some program hot topics. Next slide.
Thanks. Just some timeline reminders. Annual Form 700 for all of the administrators, board members, et cetera, at your charter schools, that needed to have been completed by April 1st. So if you are doing any sort of governance monitoring, that's a deadline you want to double check to make sure your schools are complying with. It's an important one. And additional information is available at California Fair Practices Commission Form 700. There'll be a link on the resource page. Similarly, the comprehensive site safety plan per Ed Code 47605, the safety plans need to be updated by March 1st each year. So again, if you are doing a governance compliance monitoring of your schools, those are two important dates, the April 1st for Form 700 and the March 1st for the safety plan submission. In preparation for renewals, the CASI presentation on Road to Renewals was held on April 19th, 2024. If you have not started reviewing your renewal processes and procedures for the upcoming renewal season, please revisit last Friday's Road to Renewal presentation. It should be on the CASI website, on the CDE website. In terms of LCAP preparation, LCAPs need to be updated annually, and so your schools should be working on those currently. They need to be updated and approved by their board and submitted to the authorizer and to the county office by June 30th each year. So those should be forthcoming, and you may want to shoot reminders to your portfolio of schools that you are, when you expect them to get their LCAP into you. School closures and student records. Pursuant to Ed Code 47604.32, charter school authorizer must provide timely notification to the CDE of a school that ceases operations. Please see the CDE's Charter School Closures website for additional information regarding documentation and notifications of closure action, the retention and transfer of records, financial closeout, disposition of liabilities and assets, and the responsibilities of a charter authorizer. CASI participants have previously asked about transfer of student records during a closure. Per the CDE Student Records and Transcripts website, the CDE does not have access to student records. For public schools, if a school is closed, they are to contact the local district or the county office of education. As charter schools are public schools, the question as to how to access student files for closed charter schools is based in the school's charter petition. Most schools upon closure will send their files either to the charter management organization or a sister school in their organization, if applicable, or to the school's authorizer. When files are missing, it becomes necessary to use the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, or CalPADS, to look up student history. And with that, I think we are moving on to our fiscal oversight.
Thank you. All right, next slide. Oh, good, perfect. So I'm going to now turn over the time to Dave and Tom to share about the CCAP Anti-Fraud Task Force report. Take it away, guys.
All right, if we can jump to the next slide. And I should just mention, greetings from the Fresno County Office of Education. I'm actually sitting here in Jeff Hunt's office, and we're trying to avoid any echo with he's on one side of the office and I'm on the other, but it's nice to be able to visit folks on their home turf. And we just together had a CASI training in Kings County yesterday, which was great. And Jeff participated in it because the Fresno folks were invited to drive over for that. Some of you who were at the CCAP conference 2 years ago will recognize this guy. This was Kevin Fannin, who was the former deputy district attorney from San Diego, who was one of those involved in prosecuting the A3 fraud case. And Kevin delivered a keynote address that kind of kicked our conference off 2 years ago, in which he shared some of the inside story of that whole thing and the prosecution and how it came about. And one of the messages that was very strongly delivered was that there were a lot of vulnerabilities in the system, top to bottom, that came to light. This right from the charter school level all the way up to the state level and law enforcement levels, that made it hard for cases like this to be discovered and prosecuted. And as a result of that very eye-opening conversation, Dave had the idea of assembling a group of folks that really was a broad-based task force, including charter advocates and charter attorneys, but also district attorneys, authorizer lawyers, auditors, back office. We had a back office provider, FICMAT was involved, to really take a look at what the lessons were and see if we could come up with consensus, or as close to a consensus way of possible, of some recommendations for trying to prevent this sort of thing from happening again. And so that has culminated recently in the release of some recommendations, and we can go to the next slide. So the report is out. If somebody, I think we can post the link in there, but it's you may have seen it in our alerts or what have you, and it'll be in the resources. But the report is entitled "Protecting California Public Charter Schools Against Fraud, the Charter School Sector and Beyond." The reason for the subtitle is there are some recommendations in there that are not limited to charter schools or charter school oversight, but we think are best practices for every LEA to adopt, both in the way of modeling the best practices, but also as a credibility factor. If you're an authorizer saying to your charter schools, hey, we think you really ought to consider these best practices, you're doing so better if you're in a position of doing them yourself, and there can be some some synergies and some group collective effort there that make it so that not every group is kind of figuring these things out on their own. So they come in three buckets of groups, we would say, and we set up three subgroups to sort of lead the discussion of these three areas that were identified when we were picking apart what happened with A3. One big problem identified was that there's a lot of well understood and known best practices in terms of checks and balances and internal controls and oversight that maybe are not applied consistently enough. And sometimes that's a question of scale and capacity. And so one purpose is to put out recommend some best practices for everybody and identify areas where maybe some help needs to be provided for the smallest schools and the smallest authorizers who have some capacity challenges there. And that group, just a shout out, I see Corey Loomis is on the meeting today. Corey was heading up that subgroup discussion. So we had a lot of folks that will be familiar, if you come to these chatter chats, familiar faces that were involved in this discussions, and Corey helped with that group. The second group was, one problem identified was there were a lot of people along the way, in this case and in other cases, where something just didn't smell right, but I'm not a fiscal person. I'm not sure where to go. Who can I ask about this? Who looks into these things? And so really making sure that top to bottom, everybody knows that there's a place to bring concerns or to raise questions or to talk to somebody who has greater expertise in this area. So there's a group of recommendations related to that. And the folks who helped us kind of coordinate that group were Mike Ammerman and Michelle Giacomini from FICMAT, whom we see a lot in our charter chats and our other CASI events. And so kudos to them and thanks to them. And then the third group was really, there were a few things. Mostly the spirit of these recommendations are self-help and giving charter schools and charter authorizers the agency to take on the problem themselves. But there are some things that the group identified that really, these are higher level state things beyond the control of local education officials. And could we talk about those? And for example, their leading recommendation was that somewhere in the system there be an inspector general function that would combine a knowledge of the K-12 system with subpoena power and the ability to prosecute. Because what we heard from the law enforcement side is it's very, very hard to get district attorneys to dive into these cases when they're dealing with murders and everything else, and they don't really necessarily understand the K-12 landscape that much. So that group, the discussion, Indra Ciccarelli, I'm not sure if Indra is able to join us today, but he helped lead that discussion. And there were a bunch of other people here or that you've seen in CASI. I mean, Jose Cole Gutierrez and some of his colleagues from LAUSD were there. Janice Kwan from El Dorado Selpa, Marla Hartzucker from Ventura County, Dave and Debbie from CCAP. So a lot, and I'm sure in the mix I'm forgetting somebody, and for that I apologize, but there's a lot of people here that might be in a position, especially in the breakout rooms, to share their own insights because of their participation in the conversations along the way. And with that, we'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to ask Dave to take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And I just want to add my thanks to all those who volunteered their time and effort to make sure this report could happen. I get to touch a little bit about some of the specifics there. As Tom already mentioned, most of these recommendations, the bulk of them, are self-help, things that we can do now. We don't need a law change. We just need to have the incentive to do what's needed to, in fact, help prevent and detect fraud. And I think the examples, which is the focus of Group 1, which is preventing and detecting fraud, there are some of the recommendations, for example, revolve around the adoption of by the Charter School Governance Board of both a policy and a structure where they, in fact, a committee, an audit committee, where they, in fact, review audits. Because one of the things we found was that that the charter boards didn't use the tool well, didn't understand what the tool was potentially, and there were also some issues with the auditing function. But the bottom line is that the first line of defense here is, in fact, high quality, integrity related work by charter boards. So our adoptions of our recommendations 3 and 4 is adoption of a board policy on audits and periodic training on fraud prevention responsibilities for boards and senior management. It's a good place to start with this work. There was also recommendations that about the review of the audit by an authorizer. What should they be looking for, especially in the area where there is to ensure transparency and any potential conflicts of interest, those which would have been recommendation number 6. The second piece is there are some recommendations there about providing help, especially for small authorizers and small schools. And that goes back to training. Part of this work is to make sure there's an opportunity for those small boards, whether it be a small authorizer board or a small charter, to have the appropriate training made available to them so that they understand their responsibilities and therefore do them. Now, a few recommendations are system changes beyond the control of local, but the best way to put that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, would be the idea that you can do so much on the ground through best practice, but sometimes systems changes will significantly enhance the ability to prevent a misuse of state dollars, because systems can do a lot of work that very quickly that people can't do, even if people are doing their own part. And so that's part of that work there. And an example there is one Tom already mentioned, which is the idea of an inspector general function in some way. So this is, I think, important that people recognize that. And the other piece we threw out there is the establishment of a ongoing standing fraud work group. Basically, a group that just keeps an eye on this stuff as we do new documents and templates about how to do this work well, that we update. And it's also an opportunity to share with each other any updates that are going on. The report calls for the implementation. It doesn't do much good to have a report that then sits on a shelf. All of this only works through implementation. And one of the key and powerful pieces of this approach is it's not about waiting for the legislature to do something. There's other pieces, there's other realm, but the majority of these recommendations are stuff that we all can do ourselves. And we had a whole bunch of people in the room saying, this all make good sense. We can, in fact, do this. These are high quality recommendations that will require us to do stuff a little bit different, but are doable within our own capacity. We don't need to wait for somebody's permission. And I already mentioned the idea of an annual convening of a fraud prevention work group to review how things are going and consider new recommendations. Next slide, please. Now, I also just wanted to put people, a level of comfort that the report talks about the fact that we have a huge public school system, and overall, the examples of fraud are small. So we all should be proud of the work we do, but that doesn't change the fact that we do need to make sure that we do this work in a way that reinforces the public trust. And by doing that work, we build in a concept from top to bottom of integrity of the system by charters, by the authorizers that oversee them, and frankly, in the whole system. And this is where it gets into the conversation about this is not a set of recommendations, as FCMAT indicated, as well as many of the other participants, that just, quote, is for charters. Many of these recommendations fit for all of us. So if you're an authorizer, and you're expecting a charter school to have certain pieces in place, such as a fraud hotline or something else, and that you expect them to review with a eye towards making sure that there is no fraud occurring, that you have the proper internal controls in place, that the authorizer has the same obligations to do that for themselves. And we also then extend that in terms of credibility, that CMOs adopt those same sort of recommendations. Now, at the conference the CCAP conference in June, we will devote a plenary session to this stuff, and we'll also be talking about how we, in fact, need to take a set of recommendations that were created by a group throughout the charter sector, authorizers, charters, and all the associated parties, and turn them into real work. So there'll be an opportunity there to talk about what contribution can you make? What work group may you wish to work with? How can we, in fact, do this work collaboratively? Next slide, please. Now, as many of you are aware, and many of you on this call, as Tom already indicated, have been part of the work of the CCAP task force, but there's also two other initiatives that are important. And they're important because all of a sudden, at this point in time, we have an umbrella review of fraud and fraud prevention that was provided by CCAP. Last month, we had Michelle from FCMAT discussed the review of non-classroom funding with the FCMAT and legislative analyst report. That adds another set of information. That main focus was on the SB 740 process, but it clearly spoke to these other issues in some important ways. And you also should be aware that the State Controller's Office is leading a task force to examine charter school audits. And that is the type of, because of the nature of the organization, we can expect them to do the deep dive on this piece. That report is expected by June. A number of us serve on that task force. A number of us on this call serve on that task force. And when that report comes out, we will in fact have 3 major pieces of work that have tried to define how we can in fact strengthen in simple, common sense ways our system to be more resilient to preventing fraud and more effective in detecting it when it occurs. Now, the report that comes out in June, well, I'm not sure it'll be out from the controller's office in time for the task force. I mean, in time for the CCAP conference, but that I'm looking forward to the opportunity for us to talk together, maybe in another CASI chat, about how all those 3 reports come together and what they mean for us in terms of next steps. Next slide. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Dave and Tom, for all of the hard work on putting that together and for also sharing it with us. So right now we're going to move into breakout rooms. If you have not renamed yourself, please make excuse me. Please make sure that you have renamed yourself to include your organization. We do have a Jamboard. We'd like to thank our partners who are going to be our facilitators, Michelle, John, and Jose. We really appreciate that. And we're going to move into the rooms for about 20 minutes to have a conversation about anything you need to talk about. And we'll see you in all 20 minutes. All right. Thank you so very much. It's nice to have everyone back. I'm going to go to room A to share out what they talked about quickly.
Yeah, really quickly, a question coming up about the email that we all just received this week within the last couple of days about fiscal certifying for 24-25 and what our authorizer is supposed to do. Do we just receive that data that they enter? So some questions there, obviously, since we just heard about that. And then some great conversations around some tools and resources as we start to have charter site visits. What are some places that we can get training for teams, especially new members? Some conversations around renewal and early renewals for some of those folks in high bands, and processes for DAS schools. So lots of great conversations, and just reminding the group that CCAP, CASI, and this group is a great place if you need support, resources, and encouragement.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, room B.
Hey, Tom, you were taking some notes there. Do you mind sharing out some of those?
Sure, no problem, John. We had a conversation. We also touched on, well, maybe another one, but I didn't see it myself, but a notice about upcoming data and just sort of staying tuned. We had a conversation about LCAP review. It's not approval, but it's a review. And how deep a dive do you do? How much feedback do you provide? Do you actually expect if there's glaring errors? And people have said, wow, they see some LCAPs that are pretty problematic. Is it the authorizer's role to get those fixed, or is it just a review and put them on notice? And then maybe also a cross-reference to their budget, just to make sure that there isn't a wild misalignment between what's set forth in the LCAP and the budget, and the purpose of the LCAP as far as transparency and public accountability and community engagement, those sorts of things. And then we had a conversation. We were just finishing. We got pulled back to the room in the middle of a conversation about the legislation to extend the use of verified data versus it sunsetting. And pros and cons. Some of the concerns about verified data is there's, this very long list of tools to master, and not a whole lot of guidance for authorizers in their use. And on the other hand, they're providing some data where we lack it for some grades. And while we're still awaiting progress on growth being incorporated into the dashboard, so having a way to measure growth is pretty important. And then let's see, we started off with this. Somebody jogged my memory about the first topic we talked about. Anybody recall?
I was interested, Tom, in understanding more about the non-classroom based outcome of school.
Oh, that's right. Thank you,
Didn't
Felicia.
get
Yeah,
full
yeah.
funding.
Yeah. So a couple of Felicia schools went before the ACCS and the recommendation, or was it the ACCS or the board or both? I can't remember. But at any rate, they didn't get the full funding allocation. And Felicia was asking, what do we do with that as an authorizer? How do we make sure we're notified of that? And there was discussion about, well, you need to be aware of it just for purposes of reviewing their budget. If they budgeted for the 100% and they only got the 80 or something, you need to be aware of that as the authorizer. And there was one more thing about going back to that data question. I think Janice had raised, when CDE asked all the schools to provide certain information, would the department possibly consider asking the charter school to indicate which SELPA it's part of? For those like Janice who are in SELPAs, that would be really helpful information. And Craig from the department recommended a place that you can go and bring that to the attention of the department. And there's no guarantees where they'll come out on that, but that they're responsive to inquiries like that. I think that's about it.
All right, room C.
Thanks, Michelle. We had a fruitful and efficient conversation in room C. 3 main topics came up: anti-fraud task force, site visit reports, and renewals. Under anti-fraud task force, there seems to be continued interest in helping them map out those next steps. That would be helpful. Obviously, individual authorizers can take appropriate actions. And we did note that there's further discussions on implementation, but I think there's a continued desire for support and implementation, some of those guidance steps for authorizers. Some practical tips would be helpful. Secondly, on site visits, a question was asked around, ways to, folks love doing the site visits. Sometimes the notes can pile up and doing the reports, especially if you're a smaller office, et cetera. So we had some discussions of other colleagues sharing some ideas, including some of your note-taking styles, some templates, use of technology, and even some discussion around artificial intelligence, which would require some appropriate due diligence, but some ways to maybe use some of those tools for summation, et cetera. And thirdly, on renewals, a few of us among the group have renewals next year, not the whole, it was actually a smaller number of our group, which led to the following. One, there was an appreciation for the Road to Renewal presentation that some said found very helpful as a roadmap. 2, there's a desire for additional resources and templates vis-a-vis renewal reports to the board, for example. We're happy to share some, but that's something maybe Cassie and CCAP can also collaborate. We put it on the Jamboard, culling some resources. I know we have 1 year with 1920, and I know we're going to be updating some, but maybe there's some artifacts that folks can refer to in terms of material to the board for renewal. And then, some other topics around timing of verified data, et cetera. So with great appreciation for everyone who participated. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. So I will go and talk about the non-authorizer partner discussion. We started off by talking about fraud, the fraud report. We also talked about a desire for a webinar for charters and frankly anyone to know how to make sure that the data that is coming from the school gets correctly to the dashboard. Because with all of the constant turnover, information on making sure you configure CalPads and the student information systems, make sure they sync, knowing what factors go into the dashboard. And so it would be really good to actually have a webinar that can just live on the CDE website so that anyone can go and get that training. Would also like to have the ability to set up backup dashboard coordinators, so that emails don't get missed. And then with going back to that fraud piece, an avenue for charter schools to report other bad actors or criminal action without needing to basically raise other evidence, or worst case evidence. And then finally, we were talking about non-classroom based and getting some clarity on the narrative. So did I miss anything from the non-authorizer partner group? Okay. Well, next slide, please. So this is your opportunity to give us some feedback. We truly do listen to the feedback. Please make sure that you take our survey so that we can improve our practice and get you the information that you need. Next slide. And the survey is also in the chat. So our upcoming events for Cassie will be, again, our charter chat next month on May 29th. If you are interested in receiving a 101, an authorizing 101, a fiscal 101, or any topic of your choice, we can come to you. In fact, we were at Kings County yesterday and we were at Tulare last month. Fresno was with us yesterday as well. But please reach out to Cassie and or to Tom. Next slide, please. And we also want to, Jeff, why don't you share what this one is, since you're the head of this one?
Oh, awesome. So the Charter Authorizing Connection and a partnership between a couple of our county office folks. This is part 3 of a 3-part series in charter authorizing professional learning. And so May 10th from 9 to 11, this session is on charter school renewals. And so we'll have an attorney presenter for about 2/3 of that session. And then it will end with a couple of authorizing staffs, teams talking about our approach to getting ready for the 24-25 season of renewal. So it looks to be an engaging and an informative session. And
right.
the link just got dropped in the chat. Thank you, Allison.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So Dave or Tom want to talk about CCAP?
Tom, find your button. You're muted, Tom. Let me pick it up. Okay. As we said, CCAP conference, June 18th to 21st at Irvine Marriott. Conference, the room block closes on May 24th, so please get there. And please, the big thing is they're the Cassie Authorizing 101 pre-conference piece, which again is really a high quality piece. People, when they go there, they really appreciate what was done. The Tuesday afternoon on the 18th, Wednesday morning the 19th. That way you don't get totally overwhelmed in one day. We do it in 2 half days. There is also criteria for reimbursement for your June 18th hotel accommodations for those small authorizers, say 1 to 5 schools or not more than 2 full-time dedicated authorizing staff. We're working really hard. Cassie's working really hard to get people who might otherwise not be able to go there And Friday morning, I want to bring special attention to also is going to have a focus in the authorizing big picture and a celebration of Cassie, because it'll be 2 years, 2 years plus that Cassie has done this work. Tom, did I forget anything?
No,
Okay.
you got it all. And I figured out how to unmute just in time to say, yes, you got it.
That's fine.
All right. So if you have any questions or need further insights, please feel free to contact us, and have a great rest of the day.